Okay, welcome everybody who's already connected. We're gonna wait about 60 seconds just so that everybody can connect, and then we'll get started. All right, we're waiting 30 more seconds for people to connect, and then we'll get going. All right, well, when we get going here, thank you everybody for joining today's virtual stakeholder meeting. It is October 20th, 2021. We really appreciate you for continuing to engage in this process, or if it's for your first time, thank you for joining and welcome. Today, the panelists or the folks that will be participating in the webinar are myself. My name is Jeff Freeman, and I am the CEO of Engineering Enterprises Incorporated. We also will have Allison Swisher talk today. She is the Director of Public Utilities for the City of Joliet. Later on, we're going to have Joe Johnson, who is a Vice President with Stantec, and he's a co-project manager on the Alternative Water Source Program. And then Teresa will be the last presenter, who also is a vice president with CMT, and she is a co-project manager on the project as well. Today, we certainly want this to be interactive, and we would like you to provide any questions that you might have. We do ask that you utilize the Q&A function within Zoom to be able to put the questions in there. You'll notice that there's a chat area as well. Our preference would be that you put it in the Q&A so that we can get those questions over to the panelists, and then we can address those at the end of the presentation. Anytime throughout the presentation, just load up those questions so that we have them at the end and we can jump right into it. The agenda for today is welcome remarks, obviously, for me and setting things up. And then we'll have 10-minute discussion by Allison for the Alternative Water Source Program background. Next, she's going to give us the update on the Lake Michigan allocation process. Then Teresa is going to talk to us about the regional coordination and water commission formation update. Joe is going to fill us in on the funding, where things are at with that. And then he's also going to talk to us about the program schedule. And we do have the approximately 20 minutes reserved at the end for the Q&A with the panel. We'll bring back everybody online and then go through any questions that you submit. With that, then we can turn it over to Allison, who can give us the background on the program.
All right, thanks a lot, Jeff. And as we are moving forward with this program, I'm really happy to see that we have so many people participating today. We had about 50 people register for this webinar. Going to just quickly do some background information. And we always start these by talking about, why we're moving forward with finding an alternative water source for Joliet. And that is because our current water source, which is the deep groundwater aquifer, is not going to be able to meet the city's maximum day water demands by 2030. This was information that was determined by updated groundwater modeling that the Illinois State Water Survey conducted in 2018. And so this is a very serious issue that the city moved forward with identifying an alternative water source for. And to do that, we did look at multiple alternative sources. We were tasked by the City Council in 2018 with evaluating 14 different water source alternatives. We wanted to really start from the beginning and make sure we didn't leave any options unexplored. So we did evaluate those various options, which included river alternatives, various Lake Michigan alternatives, water conservation alternatives, and we evaluated all of those for water quality and water quantity. From those alternatives, there were 5 that were identified as meeting those criteria. Those were further evaluated in 2019. And I should say from the very beginning, we've always explored these alternatives as not only being a solution for Joliet, but also being a solution for the region. And so the City Council selected Lake Michigan water as the alternative water source for the city at the beginning of 2020. And they tasked staff and the project team with evaluating 2 of those Lake Michigan alternatives further. Those were purchasing water from the city of Chicago or constructing a new intake and water facility to treat water that came from Lake Michigan via Indiana. So we have done a lot of studies related to this project, and there's multiple reports. All of the information that's on this slide is available on the program website. So if you do want some more background information, you can go to the website and see all of the reports and presentations that were presented as part of this decision-making process. So this past year, in January, the City Council did select purchasing water from the city of Chicago as the new water source alternative for Joliet and also potentially the region. This alternative does include purchasing treated water from the city of Chicago and pumping it over 31 miles out to this region for distribution. A lot of work has been going on in 2021. This is a large program effort with lots of pieces to it. So there's been work that's been done this past year is working to obtain the Lake Michigan allocation permit. And I will go into more detail to discuss that later on in this presentation. We are working with the city of Chicago to negotiate a final water supply agreement. We currently have a preliminary water supply agreement that identified key terms for this final agreement, but we do anticipate that that final agreement negotiations will be completed by the end of this year. We've been doing a lot of work to promote regional coordination and support of a new regional water commission. Teresa will talk more detail about this when she makes her presentation, but we do recognize that this is a regional issue, or that there is a regional solution to address water quality and water quantity concerns in this region. So I'm very happy that we've been able to move forward with working with a group of other communities to ultimately benefit all of us through the economies of scale to reduce the costs of providing Lake Michigan water to the southwest suburbs. We have been in the process of applying for our first WIFIA loan. WIFIA is the federal low interest loan program. We did submit for, and we're fortunate to receive funding from this program, which will help control the overall program costs. And I know Joe will talk more about the funding part of this later on in this presentation. There's been a lot of work with preliminary design of these improvements. Our goal is to work through and get to about the 30% design completion by next spring. So we have a team of engineers that has been working on this. There's a lot to coordinate and a lot of work to be done. And we have made other presentations that kind of present all the capital projects that are be part of this. And again, if you are interested in more information on the technical aspects of this project, that information is available on the website. Another very important part of this program that we've been working on in 2021 is testing associated to the ultimate water source transfer. So we do recognize that there could potentially be water quality, or there have historically in other circumstances been water quality issues when water sources are transferred, but we are starting that testing now. in order to make sure that when the water source is switched in 2030, that it's the water that everyone is drinking at their tap is safe and meets all water quality standards. The last thing we've been doing is really establishing the program delivery framework. Really need to understand how this is going to be implemented, and there's lots of tools and various teams that are a part of doing that. Sorry, going the wrong way. Okay, so I did skip over this slide. We do have a strategic plan that has been guiding us through this program. Again, it is available on the program website. We definitely have a vision of wanting to be a leader in the water industry in this region, and need to be able to provide that sustainable, reliable, and high quality water supply to Joliet and the region by 2030. Water is a critical part of supporting public health, safety, and the economic interests of this area. So I'm going to move on now to talking specifically about our Lake Michigan allocation. So in order to use water from Lake Michigan, you're required to have an allocation permit to allow for that water to be withdrawn. And this is administered by the Illinois Department of Natural Resources. So we submitted an application about a year ago in September of 2020 to obtain that permit. And through over the course of the past year, we've had multiple hearings and application submittals. And the very good news is that this was approved on September 1st of 2021. So we're very happy to have met that major milestone of the program with obtaining that Lake Michigan allocation. So we recognize that Lake Michigan is a resource that is relied on by many communities and industries in the region, and therefore it needs to be protected, and that water shouldn't be wasted. So Joliet has committed to water conservation efforts and non-revenue water reduction. And so we are committing for water conservation to not only conservation by the city of Joliet, but also individual households. And I'll talk about some ways we can do that on the next slides. And we're also committed to reducing non-revenue water to 10% by 2030. And this is a condition of our permit to do that. So as far as the water conservation efforts, the first step the city did was we updated our city codes with a number of water conservation oriented regulations. And these are items that are required as part of our Lake Michigan allocation permit. So these were, again, approved last August, and a number of them, I'll just go through these very quickly. First one is that we are committed to monitoring and correcting for leakage. So we do this through annual leak detection, where a company comes out and does go and set up equipment to identify where pipes are leaking, and then we promptly correct those. Next, we have done a lot more to increase the metering of our water use. And so we are using hydrant meters for construction purposes. And then I've also constructed 3 bulk water filling stations. And so these new stations help us with the tracking of water when it's purchased in bulk at those facilities. We've also worked to refine requirements for sub-metering in multi-tenant buildings. And most significantly, we have clarified the lawn watering restrictions, as well as adding indoor water conservation measures that include the use of a water sense labeled plumbing fixture. So we have found that a lot of outdoor water usage is where we have the opportunity for water conservation. So the city does have the even odd restrictions, and also the times of day at which you can water your lawn. So these are all very important moving forward with the implementation of the Lake Michigan water supply that people follow these measures. So, we can look to our residents as well to conserve, and conserving water is a great idea, not only for protecting Lake Michigan, but also for reducing the cost of your water bill. And so we have a number of ways that residents can conserve water, and there's definitely more ideas on the website. But you can, city has established 2 programs in order to encourage residents to conserve water. And this is through our rain barrel subsidy and low flow toilet rebate programs. So you can, get a rain barrel to use to help water your outdoor plants. And we have found that toilets are very high percentage of water use in the household. And so those older toilets that aren't as efficient, we have the program that will encourage those to be replaced with those low flow toilets. As always, you can always turn off the tap while you're brushing your teeth. Make sure when you wash the dishes that you fill up the sink instead of letting the water run. Always try and run full loads in the dishwasher and the clothes washer, and take shorter showers, which I know is a hard one for most people. The city does have shower timers available if you're interested, and recommending everyone takes 5-minute showers, and you can see a significant reduction then in your water usage and water bill. One thing we are promoting is another way to help residents with their water conservation is a water billing customer portal. And so this will allow residents to have real-time monitoring of their water usage. And so you can log in and see, per hour how much water has been utilized. And you can also set water usage alerts so that if you are getting to a certain amount of water usage, that you'll be alerted, and you can then take measures to reduce water usage. Or if you're going to be on vacation and you want to make sure that they don't have a leak while you're gone, you can set those alerts for that as well. So we are hoping to have this program available early next year so that everyone can have that access to the information to help with water conservation efforts. Next, I want to talk about our non-revenue water reduction. And I think the question is, what is non-revenue water? And it's very simply put, it's the water that isn't billed. And so we have revenue water, which is all the water that is billed and for authorized usage. And then you have water that isn't billed. And so this is for losses in the system, such as leaking pipes. It can also include water theft, and also include losses that are due to meters just measuring inaccurately. So we are really focusing in on ways to reduce that non-revenue water component. And to do this, we have formed a water loss task force. This is an interdepartmental team that meets on a quarterly basis to discuss matters related to water loss. They are tasked with doing the annual leak detection. They've also been exploring installation of district meters throughout the distribution system. This will help us pinpoint and narrow down to areas of town where we do see significant water loss. We've been implementing a water meter testing program of all of our smaller residential meters, in addition to the larger industrial meters. And so with that, we are coming up with a program to replace water meters that are not performing and are under reading, resulting in that non-revenue water. We've also been looking into our billing system just to make sure that all the information that is entered into there is accurate. So again, our goal, as I mentioned earlier, is to reduce our non-revenue water to less than 10% by 2030. Currently, the city's non-revenue water is about 30%. So we do have a large undertaking over the next 8 years to get to that 10%. So we are having our most significant strategy to do this is to increase our water main replacement to 3.2% per year. So currently we have been replacing water mains at a rate of 1% per year, but we have seen, as this shows, that by increasing that water main replacement to 3.2%, we can get down to that 10% level by 2030. And this exhibit just shows that water main replacement program. And by doing this, we will replace all water mains constructed prior to the 1970s. This will be done at a rate of 20 miles per year over the next 8 years. And the costs are about $34 million per year. So this is a significant program. We are fortunate to have, again, received funding from the federal low interest loan program to help fund this. But as you can see from this map, we are, touching almost every water main in that, older section of town, adjacent to the downtown area. So it's going to be a lot of work. And, we are confident that by doing this, that we can then achieve that goal of reducing our non-revenue water. So I will go ahead and turn it over to Teresa to talk about the regional coordination and water commission formation.
Great, thank you, Allison. Great news on securing the Lake Michigan allocation for the city. So good afternoon, everyone. My name is Teresa O'Grady. I'm with Crawford Murphy and Tilley, CMT, and I'm one of the program managers for the consultant team working on the alternative water source program. As Allison mentioned, Joliet's existing water source, the deep sandstone aquifer, is being depleted to the point where it will no longer be able to meet the city's maximum day demands by the year 2030. And as Allison said too, this is not just a Joliet problem. This is a regional problem. From the beginning, it was recognized that there were economies of scales with the regional solution resulting in a lower impact to water rates. So today I want to provide you with an update on the regional coordination and formation of the Regional Water Commission. So with the goal of saving money in mind, there has been significant effort in regional outreach, which began in 2019 and continues in 2021. Once Joliet selected Chicago Water as their new water source in January this year, Water Commission formation efforts kicked into gear. So beginning in February of 2021, Water Commission formation meetings have been held at least monthly with potential regional partners. And the 12 communities participating in the Water Commission formation are shown in this exhibit and include not only Joliet, which would be a member of the Water Commission, but also Rockdale, Shorewood, Minooka, Shanahan, Oswego, Montgomery, Yorkville, Romeoville, Crest Hill, Lamont, and Homer Glen. And then potential regional partners have been meeting in two groups, a technical advisory group, which has met twice a month, and then a mayors and managers group that meets monthly. Over the past several months, the potential regional partners have been discussing key principles related to the formation of a water commission. One of those key principles is related to regional governance. The new Regional Water Commission would be governed by a board of commissioners that would be made up of one elected official from each member serving as a commissioner, and each commissioner would have one vote. To advise the board of commissioners, there would be a technical advisory committee made up of one staff member from each member community. To form the commission, there would be an intergovernmental agreement, or an IGA, between the members to establish the key terms for the commission. And any modifications to the IGA would require a unanimous vote of the members. Delineation of ownership is another key principle related to Water Commission formation. The Regional Water Commission would construct, own, operate, and maintain the infrastructure from Chicago to each member community's water delivery metering point. And then member communities could have either a single delivery point or multiple delivery points. Downstream of the member community's delivery point, the member community would still own, operate, and maintain its own water system, including any improvements required to accommodate the new water source. So here's a schematic showing that delineation of ownership. The system components that would be owned by the Regional Water Commission are shown in green. In this schematic, the water delivery metering points are the stars, with the yellow stars being the primary delivery points, and then gray stars being secondary delivery points. Downstream of the water delivery metering point, the water systems shown in orange here would still be owned, operated, and maintained by the individual member communities. Another key principle related to Water Commission formation is the basis for commission member costs. 3 cost categories have been identified. The first is water supply costs, which include Chicago purchased water costs and commission operation and maintenance cost. This is a volumetric cost that would be based on the amount of water used by each member community times a volumetric rate at dollars per 1,000 gallons. The next category is capital costs. This relates to the total costs associated with the construction of the commission infrastructure, along with the financing of these costs and the resulting required debt service repayment. The cost would be distributed amongst the commission members based on each member's needed capacity in relationship to the entire system capacity. Each member's needed capacity is being established based on their projected 2050 maximum day demand. And maximum day demand is the 24-hour water usage during the highest day of water usage in a given year. So the final category is commission administration, which includes fixed costs related to commission operation. And this would be split equally between the members. Well, there's still a lot to do regarding Water Commission formation. We have to implement the new source by 2030. And in order to have time to design and construct the infrastructure, we need to know what the final system capacity is. But in order to size the system correctly, we need to know what communities will be part of the Regional Water Commission. With all of this in mind, we've developed the following timeline for Regional Water Commission formation. So as you can see there, October 2021 is right now. Legislation which would enable the formation of the new Regional Water Commission is being presented for approval in the veto session. Over the next few months, we'll continue to work with the potential member communities to reach consensus on key principles and prepare the preliminary agreement. Then in January of 2022, communities wishing to participate in the Regional Water Commission would approve the preliminary agreement. Then by end of March 2022, member communities that do not currently have a Lake Michigan allocation would need to apply for a Lake Michigan allocation permit, which typically takes 10 to 12 months to obtain. Once all the member communities have obtained a Lake Michigan allocation, member communities will approve the intergovernmental agreement to form the Regional Water Commission. And that would be anticipated in the first quarter of 2023. Promptly after Water Commission formation, once the Water Commission is formed, there are several actions that would need to be taken by the Commission, including approval of the bylaws, approval of the water supply agreement between the members and the Commission, approval of the program management agreement with Joliet and the Commission, and the acceptance of the assignment of the Chicago water supply agreement. And that's anticipated end of quarter 2 of 2023. And then all this needs to be completed prior to the 3rd and 4th quarters of 2023, when the first construction contracts would be permitted and bid. So significant effort has been spent this year related to regional coordination and Water Commission formation because there are significant benefits of a Regional Water Commission. First of all, there are lower rates due to cost sharing and economies of scale. There is a distribution of risk amongst member communities. As more communities are involved, there is greater support of state and federal agencies as well as state and federal legislators. And finally, of critical importance, the Water Commission legislation allows for the ability to obtain access for construction and right-of-ways outside city limits, which makes the construction easier. with all that, it's beneficial to not only Joliet, but the region for the regional coordination and formation of a water commission. So I will turn it over to Joe Johnson now for a funding update.
Great, thanks, Teresa. So you've heard a lot about the allocation process and about the regional efforts to form the commission. Another critical part of this overall program is figuring out how we're going to pay for it, how we're going to fund it. It's critical to understand these elements because we need to have the money in place. We need to understand where it's going to come from, how it's going to be distributed across the commission members, and make sure that we're doing the funding in a manner that makes the project as affordable as possible for all of the members. So if we move forward, we've been looking at a range of options for funding the project. This is not a project that can be funded by cash on hand. There's obviously a lot of investment that needs to be made over a series of years. So there's going to have to be money borrowed and then repaid by the commission members to fund the overall project. The sources that we've identified for funding have not really changed over the past year or so, but a lot of work has gone into advancing Joliet's position and the position of the future commission to make use of these. The key components, and Allison mentioned several of these before, but the Water Infrastructure Financing and Innovation Act is a federal program administered by the US EPA that's specifically set up to provide low interest funding to very large infrastructure projects. Joliet was very proactive a couple of years ago into getting this project on the radar screen with US EPA, and has been successful in getting the project approved for consideration for funding. And so we'll talk a little bit more about how that comes into play and how that will help the overall program. Secondly, the State Revolving Fund Program is a state administered program through the Illinois EPA that also provides low interest loans for infrastructure projects, primarily in the water and wastewater sector. This is a program that a lot of municipalities throughout the region are familiar with. They've used it for other projects. Joliet has used it extensively in the past. And so it's a great project or a great program for attracting or aligning low interest funding for specific projects that can be moved forward. It's also a mechanism that may be an opportunity as additional infrastructure funding becomes available through the federal government that may be funneled through the state revolving fund. So we want to make sure that we're well positioned to use that source. Where those low interest loans are not available, much of the difference will have to be made up through the sale of revenue bonds. And again, these are bonds that are sold by either Joliet or eventually by the commission that are then repaid from revenue generated from the sale of water down the road. So these fit into understanding the overall long-term funding strategy and how the expenditures that need to be made in the next few years can be spread out over time to make the program affordable. Lastly, there is a lot of discussion these days about infrastructure funding across the country. And so we're being very aggressive in tracking programs at the federal level and at the state level to make sure that we're aware of opportunities to secure additional federal assistance related to infrastructure projects, and to look for targeted grants that may not provide funding for a large portion of the program, but help us knock off small pieces of it, and again, keep the overall cost of the program down. So our funding strategy, the principles that guide it are pretty simple. We want to secure, identify and secure the lowest cost capital that we can. It's critically important to maintain keeping the overall cost of the program down. The cost of the infrastructure that has to be built is going to be governed by what that infrastructure is and the market conditions at the time that we bid those projects. But the financing costs that can add significantly to the overall program costs are something that we can manage. So we want to try to be as aggressive as we can in doing that. We want to make sure that the funding terms that go into these loans and these programs that we use don't create barriers that might prevent participation by other commission members. So a key part of our activities right now is understanding how these loan programs would apply for Joliet, for other commission members, and for the commission itself once it is up and formed. The key goal is really this third bullet, is to mitigate the cost impacts on Joliet and commission members. The cost of this program will eventually be borne by the people that are using the Lake Michigan water it supplies. So we want to do everything we can to control those costs and keep them reasonable. And then lastly, recognizing that The region is diverse economically in a lot of different ways. And so we want to make sure that we're being sensitive to affordability and looking at what are the programs that we can implement and identify as part of this effort to make sure that where there are portions of communities or households that may struggle to deal with some of the rate increases associated with the program, that we have affordability programs that can be put into place and used to offset some of those impacts. The current distribution that we're intending right now of using these sources for funding, the WIFIA program allows for funding of up to 49% of all the eligible program costs. Our intention is to maximize that source of funding and try to use as much of it as we can for a variety of reasons. Number one, it provides low interest money. Secondly, there's a lot of flexibility in the way that money is paid back that allows us to, again, spread the costs out and keep the impact on water rates down. We hope to use the low interest loan program at the state level for roughly another quarter of the program to cover those costs. And then the balance will be made up by those revenue bonds. And again, we're looking at this very strategically to say, while we don't have a crystal ball and can't predict exactly what interest rates will be, certainly there is some importance at looking at the current environment saying, well, if interest rates are low now and we're able to lock those in on some of these programs, how do we best use, what's the best split of these different options to make sure that we position ourselves for managing the financing costs over the whole duration of the program. So as Teresa pointed out and Allison did before, we're very happy that we've secured the Lake Michigan allocation. One of the other big milestones for the program team in the last few months has been to get approval from the US EPA on our first WIFIA loan application. There's a lot of material that goes into that application. It was submitted in July. In August, US EPA came back to us and they deemed the application complete, which means that we're now working through the process of financial due diligence and really the process of working towards closing of the loan. The first loan amount is about $227 million, and it was specifically crafted to support the water main replacement program that Allison and Teresa have talked about that's going to be critical to reducing the non-revenue water in Joliet, as well as the planning and design phases of the alternative water supply program here over the next few years. So that money will be put to use right away in accordance with our funding strategy. The goal is to have that loan closed by the first quarter of next year after we work through all the paperwork and details now. But then that line of credit becomes available to Joliet to begin using to drive these programs forward and get work actually proceeding. It's important to understand that this won't be our only shot at that WIFIA line of credit and that funding that's available. Through the letters of interest that Joliet has submitted to US EPA, the city has been approved for a credit line of up to roughly $731 million for this program. So that's 49% of all the potential program costs that could come in across the whole program, including the water main replacement program. Right now, this first loan is for a certain chunk of that. As the program moves forward and preliminary design of the individual infrastructure components is completed, and we prepare to move into construction, there will be a second round of WIFIA funding or a loan application put in to then fund the construction phases of the program. So we'll continue to work with US EPA over the life of the program to make sure we take advantage of this source of funding. We mentioned some of the other potential sources of funding. Back this summer in early July, Congressman Foster and Congresswoman Lauren Underwood came out to Joliet to learn a little bit more about the program, the efforts that are going on. They visited one of the water main replacement projects that was currently underway. And through our discussions with them and the efforts of Joliet and its partners, they were able to help us put Joliet in line for about $3.5 million of federal funding in the 2022 appropriations package, specifically for water main replacement and the alternative water source program. While $3.5 million is just a small piece of the overall program cost, this is an example of the types of strategic opportunities that we want to make sure we take advantage of, both to secure funding where it's available and also to keep the profile of the project high among local, regional, state, and federal decision makers so that we're able to continue to get their support and leverage that as we look for funding for different aspects of the program. And then lastly, I did mention before the affordability effort. We're working towards completion of an affordability strategy that would be published this year that would set specific goals and targets and identify initiatives that can be undertaken by Joliet, but could hopefully be used by other regional partners as a template, and looking at affordability of water and making sure that as we move forward with this critical program, we also make sure that we're being considerate of the communities that we serve and the households that for which a water rate increase will be important and could be significant for them. And some of the key themes in that strategy, as Allison mentioned before, revolve around promoting conservation, right? The first thing that a household can do to control its water bill is to manage how much water is used in that household. So we want people to be aware of that, understand how that impacts their water use, and look for ways to really encourage efficient use of water across the region. Secondly, and this is incumbent on the program team, we're working very hard to manage program costs. There's a lot of infrastructure that has to be built and will have to be operated. As we go through the process of preliminary engineering, we're questioning assumptions that have been made before and looking for ways that we can perhaps modify the plans for the infrastructure to keep costs down, whether it's capital costs or O&M costs. And then as we move into more detailed design, there will be value engineering sessions conducted again as we work through the design to look and ask questions of the design team and look for opportunities to make sure that we're managing those costs and we're putting together bidding packages that will be attractive to construction firms and help us get the best price for the work that has to be done. The external kind of efforts on the affordability strategy relate to leveraging external sources of assistance. Recently, one of the programs that's been put out is called the Low Income Household Water Assistance Program. It's comparable to a program that was done a few years ago for heating assistance, but this is a program specifically targeted towards households that may be struggling to pay for their water bill, provides external assistance and funding that does not come through Joliet or the other regional partners. It's administered at the county level, and it gives us a way of providing some benefits, some help to communities that may be struggling to pay for their water bills. That's just one example. There are other programs that have been implemented around the country in other communities that have been going through these types of major programs to figure out how to make funding available to households to offset the impact of water rate increases. And then lastly, there's a water rate structure itself. Joliet is currently on a 3-year cycle of reviewing and adjusting their water rates. So the current rates are in place through November of next year of 2022. And then there will be a rate adjustment that has to be made at the end of next year. A key part of our effort right now is to update the costs and then to work with Joliet's rate consultant to understand how is that rate structured and are there adjustments that could be made in the way the rates are structured to make sure that we're properly billing community or households for water across the city and look for ways to try to make sure that we can promote affordability across all the neighborhoods in the community. So there's a lot of activity going on around the funding strategy and getting that in place. But then really the last item that we want to update everyone on today is really the schedule and what is the schedule for delivering water and completing the water source program. There are a lot of moving parts and people have seen, I think, this general schedule multiple times. We're in 2021 right now, working through preliminary design. And as Teresa pointed out, it's the decision by potential regional partners late this year, early next year will be critical because that will allow us to finally define the capacity that we have to design for. There's a lot of work going on right now looking at all the elements we can, but that number will become critical to the design process. Once that's established, we can really accelerate our work into final design and preparing bidding packages for all the different work that's going to go on. You can imagine with a program of this size, there's not going to be just one construction contract. There will be many construction contracts spread out over time, opportunities, and those contracts will be sized to provide opportunities for contractors of all sizes. Some of them will be very large. Some of the projects will also be smaller in the hope that we can make sure we're providing opportunities and access to the program for contractors of all size. But that final design effort will go on over that 3-year period. And then around the late 2024, mid 2024, you'll start to see projects moving into construction. And there will be a lot of work to be done in that construction arena between 2024 and 2030 to get water flowing to the region by 2030. when you think about all the items that are going on here, it's not just the engineering design that's required to move the program forward. There's a lot of legal and administrative work that goes into securing the allocation permit, that goes into creating the framework for the Water Commission, establishing the agreements with the city of Chicago, and starting to lay the groundwork for land acquisition, right-of-way acquisition that's required to implement the project. There are a long list of regulatory requirements in terms of permits, whether that be permits for construction from the Illinois EPA for water construction, whether they're environmental permits to make sure that the program is being constructed in a manner that doesn't create environmental impacts around the region, whether they're agreements related to right-of-way and crossing of railroads, crossing of waterways, crossing of highways. So there's a tremendous amount of effort going on right now to make sure we identify those regulatory requirements and build them into our overall schedule. The technical work we've talked about is really supporting the design. It's understanding the key components of the pumping stations, the pipeline improvements, the local improvements that have to be made in Joliet, making sure we know what the design criteria are for them and how that work is going to be implemented so that it operates efficiently. And then lastly, as we talked about the financial components, laying the groundwork for making sure that we can fund the project in a way that it can be completed on time and in an affordable manner. So when we look at a high level schedule, just to kind of give you an idea of what to expect over the near term, the top part of this bar chart really focuses on those administrative, legal, financial kind of aspects of the program. And that's where there's a lot of activity right now. Significant work is going into negotiating the water supply agreement with the city of Chicago and working out the details of that. That includes reviewing and finalizing the framework that's going to govern how water rates are set with Chicago going on down the road. Joliet was successful in establishing a cost of service basis for its water rates with Chicago, and that provides a lot of protection to Joliet in terms of having a formal framework for how those rates are set. And that's critical to the long-term viability of the project. As Teresa outlined, there's a lot of work going on related to Water Commission formation this year, next year, and into early 2023. And then with the financing, we're working on the first WIFIA loan, as we talked about, and we'll be positioning the city for multiple SRF loans on recurring years to take advantage of that program and help offset the costs. In terms of the actual infrastructure development activities, right now we're focused on design, permitting, and land acquisition. Again, working up the details of how these facilities are going to operate, what are they going to look like, what materials are they made of, where will they physically go. And that work will be intense over the next few years, but will really continue even as construction starts, because we will be able to stage and phase some of the construction projects. We won't start every project on the same day. So that allows that design, permitting, land acquisition will go on for a time period. And then as we get into the later years, there will be permitting components for individual bid packages that go out. The construction for the alternative water source program will really start up in about mid-2024, and it will include construction in Chicago. So there's work to be done at the connection point where the Water Commission will take its water from Chicago. There's work to be done on the regional system in between Chicago and the Joliet region. And then there's work that's going to have to be done in Joliet and also within the individual systems of the regional partners. Each community in this area currently relies on groundwater. When you make that switch from groundwater to surface water, there are infrastructure improvements that have to be made to switch from a system where you may be taking water from multiple locations to a system where most of your water is coming in at one point. So all of that work will start to ramp up, we expect right now in mid-2024 and run through about 2029 with the goal of being completed in time to give us about a year to go through startup testing and commissioning of all the facilities and bring the water system online by the middle of 2030. However, there will be significant construction work going on in Joliet as early as next year related to the water main replacement program. As Allison outlined, the city has established a very aggressive goal of replacing many miles of water main each year over the course of the next decade to replace that aging infrastructure, reduce leakage in the system, and drive that non-revenue water down. So you will start to see construction going on, as early as next year on those water main replacement programs, and that's a sign that the program is moving ahead and that work is progressing. So hopefully this gives you a bit of a snapshot of how we expect the overall program to proceed, what to expect to happen when. Again, there's a lot of detail behind these few bars on the schedule, a lot of moving pieces, but this does give us an outline of when to expect that real significant transition from the design and permitting and administrative and legal parts of the program to the construction phase. So with that, I'm going to turn it back over to Jeff and let him kind of bring us home here.
And I'll just jump in and talk about our public engagement. In our last stakeholder presentation, we had presented our public outreach plan. And so if anyone's interested in learning more about how we are engaging the public, this stakeholder meeting is one of those ways. We have that document on the website, but we do encourage everyone to get involved. You can sign up to be on our mailing list to do that by going to rethinkwaterjoliet.org. We are sending out newsletters and other information via e-blast. So please help us spread the word.
All right, thank you, Allison and Joe and Teresa. At this point, we can bring the moderators back on. I'll give a reminder on the instructions here, but we can get ready to go with the group. It looks like we actually have a pretty quiet group so far. I don't see any questions in the Q&A panel yet, but there is definitely still time. So please go ahead and add those questions. So the way that you do it, if you have not done it before, is you find your taskbar there for Zoom. Oftentimes you have to move the cursor over the top and then it will drag down, and then you touch the Q&A button and it should open up that Q&A panel. And then after that, you type in your question and then you hit enter or send, and it will come to the overall group. So with that, again, we're going to bring Allison, Joe, and Teresa back online here. We do have one question so far, so please, again, provide questions as you can think of them. First question for the group is, how much float do you have in the overall schedule for the job?
Jeff, you want me to jump in and take that one?
I think that would be great, Joe. Thank you, since you talked about the schedule.
Sure, thanks. So we're actually in the process of updating the program schedule right now. We've gone through an analysis and this was done actually last year when we were going through the comparison of Joliet's two alternatives, to go through and convince ourselves that the program is constructible and we can meet the 2030 deadline. But you can imagine actually figuring out how much float we have, and by float we mean how much can the schedule slide or adjust without affecting the end date. Knowing that really depends on knowing all the final components, which then depends on knowing exactly who is in the Water Commission. So we're working very hard right now on the design of the components of the project in Chicago and the eastern end of the transmission main system, where it's not really impacted that much by which communities end up participating in the Regional Water Commission. The western end of the system, there are significant impacts. Teresa outlined the, I think, 11 or 12 communities that are currently in the discussions. Depending on who all joins the commission, the transmission main alignment changes at that end of the system. So I can't give you a specific number of months of float right now, but we are confident in this overall schedule that can be delivered by May 2030. We know which components of the program are perhaps the most time sensitive right now, and so those are the ones that we're really focusing our preliminary engineering efforts on, so that design of those can be completed early. But some of the critical items here in the next few months will then allow us to really update that schedule. So finalizing the agreement with Chicago, getting a sense of who is in the commission, and then driving forward and completing some of that preliminary design. So stay tuned for additional updates, but we'll continue to update that schedule so everybody can see how we're progressing.
All right, sounds good, Joe. Thank you for that response. We have had a couple more questions submitted. Thank you very much, folks, for adding those in. Second question is, will results of any environmental studies be shared publicly? And I would say, Joe, I think you're up for that one as well.
Absolutely. So both the construction permits that Joliet will be seeking, as well as the funding sources that we're using, have environmental requirements associated with them, especially at the federal level. Any projects that receive federal funding are required to go through an environmental review under what's called the National Environmental Protection Act, or NEPA. And so those environmental assessments and studies that are being done with the individual projects and funding applications will be part of public documents that go in with some of that, with those funding information. So as we complete the preliminary engineering reports over the course of the next year, there'll be environmental studies conducted in the field and documented. And yeah, we'll have to, I don't know that we have a specific framework established for how that will be shared, but as Allison's laid out to date, we've been very transparent in posting information to the program website, and we'll certainly continue to do that. So people should get visibility into those aspects of the program.
All right, good. Thank you, Joe. Next question there is, what part of local government will be in charge of the local water access points, and how will the people responsible be elected?
Okay, I can go ahead and answer that one, Jeff. So the way the commission is structured is that the commission will own the infrastructure from Chicago out to the delivery points in each community. And so the community, the local government then is responsible for the water and the infrastructure at all points downstream of that delivery point. So the delivery point will be within the municipal boundaries of that community. So the commission will be governed by a board of commissioners, and that board of commissioners will be made up of an elected official appointed from each of the member community. So that could be, that would be either, you know, the current mayor or president, or a current trustee or council member. So that would not be a separate election for that. It would just be made up of one of the elected officials from those member communities.
And Allison, then the member communities, you know, city council or village board would appoint that commissioner for the water commission.
All right, sounds good. Thank you, ladies. Next question then is, do you have any idea on how much the rates might increase?
Yeah, so I'll jump in here. We have been looking at the rates as water rates for Joliet residents in particular, as it relates to the alternative water source program. And we had presented in 2020 what those projected rate increases would be, or average monthly bill would be for over the next 10 to 20 years. So we identified it for 2030 and 2040, and it's dependent on the number of members who would join the commission. So as I recall, the current average monthly bill is about $34 a month for water. It's projected to increase anywhere between $78 and $87 per month for 2030, depending on the size of the system, whether it's Joliet only or regional folks participate in the commission, going up to between $117 and $138 per month for the average monthly bill in 2040 dollars. So that is part of the 2020 evaluation and documents that are included online if you want more information about that.
Okay, thank you, Teresa. Next question is, what are the current municipalities that are currently impacted by the current water depletion issue? Allison, you want to take that one?
Yes, so as Teresa mentioned, there are 11 other communities that we are talking with about joining the commission, and each has different circumstances for, related to their existing water source. So some of the communities are impacted by, water quantity issues with the deep aquifer. And so those communities that currently rely on the deep aquifer and also are at varying stages of being impacted by the water depletion include Manuka, Shanahan, Shorewood, Oswego, Montgomery, Yorkville, Romeoville, Lamont. Other communities are dealing with water quality issues, and those are water quality issues related to the shallow aquifer. So communities that rely more heavily on the shallow aquifer include Crest Hill, and so they are looking at those issues related to their water source.
All right, next then we have in the right-of-way acquisition phase, does the city envision purchasing fee simple title, easements, licenses, or a mix of both? Is it safe to assume that acquisition of legal interests in real estate will be perpetual in nature? Joe, could you take that one, please?
Absolutely, and it's a great question. I think anybody who can think about driving from Chicago to Joliet realizes that our pipeline route has to cross through many communities, cross many different jurisdictions. So securing the right of way for that pipeline is critical, and making sure that that pipeline or that right of way is secured for a long term is critical. We're talking about a 66-inch diameter pipe here. It's not something that we want to construct and then have to move anytime in the future. So the answer to the question is it will certainly be a mix of approaches. Within Joliet, there are facilities that are being constructed. There will be some sites where certainly the city will outright purchase land for, say, a new pump station or a new storage tank. But along the transmission main outside Joliet, most of that will be a mix of easement, licenses, and other types of agreements. In cases where we're crossing right of way, for example, that's owned by a railroad or by IDOT or the tollway, they're not going to sell us that land. We would end up with an easement or a permit agreement that would govern the conditions under which we're allowed to construct the pipeline and operate it over time. In other communities where we're going through a community, there's going to be a lot of negotiation going on. You can imagine that communities that are not going to be directly served by this pipeline, I think in general, they're going to want to be cooperative, but they're also going to want to make sure that they and their residents are made whole and with regards to the disruption. So we'll be working with those communities to determine, first of all, where best to align the pipeline so it's in a location that fits well with their plans. And then to make sure that there's a fair agreement in terms of how that right of way is restored and how that work is done. But in most cases, those would also be easements or licenses. So it will be a mix of different methods, and that's a huge part of the a huge parallel activity of the preliminary design is identifying all those right of way entities and coordinating with them to get agreement on where that pipe can go and what the constraints are around it being there for a long period of time.
Thank you, Joe. Next is the timeline for other municipalities to commit to the new water commission is tight, which is understandable for planning and construction. Is there a need for that municipality to upgrade infrastructure to switch to Lake Michigan water? And then what is that timeline? And Teresa, I think you could probably take that one, right?
Yeah, I can jump in here. Yes, as in most cases, the members who do join the Water Commission would have upgrades that they would have to do to their own system, mostly from moving from a multiple entry point system to a single entry point with the water delivery station. And so there's likely distribution system modifications that need to take place, as well as a need to add storage to have 2 times their daily allocation in storage per requirements with the City of Chicago water supply agreement. So the time frame for them would be similar to Joliet as far as the new facilities at the Chicago connection would be constructed and be brought online at the beginning of 2030. So municipalities that would be member communities would also receive water in 2030. And therefore they would have to have the upgrades to their system completed before then to receive the new water source.
Thank you, Teresa. Next question. Are there various types of construction of this new pipeline being considered depending on potential impacts, constraints, and alignments. Joe, can you take that one, please?
Yes, and the answer is yes, definitely. I mean, again, you can imagine we're going through a range of different neighborhoods and areas from very urban areas within the city of Chicago to suburban areas, and then to some less developed areas as we get closer to the Joliet region. There are many crossings that will be required for the water main. So crossings of large waterways or large highways will need to be done through what we call trenchless construction, where the pipe is essentially tunneled or jacked and bored under some type of obstruction, again, railroad or highway or waterway. Other areas will be what we call open cut construction, where there'll be a trench excavated, the pipe placed, and then that trench restored. And there may be some trenchless considerations as well if there are environmentally sensitive areas. We've seen projects in other areas where if there are concerns about a sensitive wetland or other area that would be disrupted by open cut construction, then there are a variety of methods that can be used to again install that pipeline without disturbing the surface area. So the preliminary engineering team has gone through one exercise already of basically classifying all the segments of the transmission main route based on the type of construction that will be anticipated. And that was used in developing the costs that we presented last year. As the final alignments are being developed this year, once we know who the regional commission members are, then that will be updated again, and that will become the basis for starting to package those bid packages for pipeline construction.
All right, thanks, Joe. Take a breath because we got another one for you. Will there be one entity acquiring the overall project right away, or will commission members be responsible for right-of-way acquisition within their respective boundaries?
Hey,
Yeah,
and Joe,
yeah, Teresa, we can tag
I'll
team.
give you a break and jump in on this. The right of way that is, I showed the schematic showing what would be owned by the commission, anything in green. So between Chicago to the member delivery points, that would all be infrastructure that would be designed and constructed by the commission, and the right of way would be acquired for that. And so anything that is being constructed ahead of a member community's water delivery metering point would be part of the commission, that the commission would then be responsible for right-of-way access and any kind of easements or permitting required for that.
Good. We do have another right-of-way question, so you and Joe can fight over that one. Beyond the right-of-way acquisition agreements, do you think there will need to be separate agreements allowing for periodic inspection and maintenance access by Joliet or the commission?
I'll jump in on that
Yeah,
one.
go ahead.
I mean, yes, well, and I don't know that there would necessarily be separate agreements, but what we would anticipate is there will be, there will be temporary easements and temporary licenses for construction of the facility. And then in most cases, there will need to be a permanent easement or permanent agreement that would cover the period for operation and maintenance. And absolutely, the commission will need to have access to get in and periodically inspect and maintain the system, operate valves. There will be fiber optic running alongside the pipeline that will provide the backbone for our SCADA and communication system. So definitely there will be the agreements that will be developed will consider both construction and then operation of the system long term.
Okay, and then another question here is, could we just get a refresher on the projected timeline of construction? Think back to Joe.
Right, and I think after this meeting we will get the slides posted, so they'll be available. But right now, the current anticipation is that the early projects related to the alternative water source program would likely start construction in 2024. It's possible that we might accelerate some of them a little bit further, but that's the current plan right now. And that would likely include projects at the Chicago connection site, because those facilities are on the critical path. And then potentially some of the Joliet distribution improvements that are needed within the city of Joliet. As I did mention, the water main replacement program, that construction will be ongoing. There have been projects under construction this summer. There will be more projects under construction next summer in Joliet, and they will continue every year throughout, out through the 2030 period.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Joe. So a lot of good questions that were submitted. Thank you. I think that's all of them that were submitted. So with that, just again, a big thank you to everybody for participating today. As Allison stated, this process is intended to be an open book, very transparent. Certainly appreciate your input and your questions along the way. I would suggest that if you're out talking to your neighbors, you might want to just ask them if they're aware of what's going on, and if not, maybe give them some background and send them over to the city's website, rethinkwaterjoliet.org, and then certainly with the social media channels that they have as well. So with that, please, everybody, have a great rest of your day and a great rest of your week. And we look forward to doing this again sometime in the near future. Goodbye, everyone.